Hi everyone, once again, welcome back to One Code Camp. My name is On and today I am excited to start our journey into the JavaScript, the language that powers up much of the web. In this series, we will explore everything from the basics to more advanced concepts. Today, in our first installment, we will start with an introduction to JavaScript covering data types and variables. Whether you're completely new to coding or looking up to brush up your JavaScript skills, this series has something for everyone, so let's dive right in. Here is a sample simple calculator created using JavaScript. And here's a game created using JavaScript. JavaScript is a versatile programming language that plays a pivotal role in web development. It allows you to add interactivity, manipulate the document object model, and enhance user experience on websites. So why is JavaScript so important in web development? JavaScript enables you to create dynamic and interactive web pages. It powers features like image sliders, form validation, and real-time updates, enhancing the overall user experience. Unlike server-side languages, JavaScript runs directly in the browser. This client-side scripting reduces server load and makes websites more responsive. JavaScript is also supported by all major web browsers, ensuring that your code works seamlessly across platforms and devices. The JavaScript ecosystem is vast, offering a plethora of libraries and frameworks that empower developers. Here are some popular ones. Node.js is a server-side JavaScript runtime. Node.js allows developers to build scalable, high-performance applications. It's particularly popular for building real-time applications and API. Next, we have the React, a widely adopted library for building user interfaces. React is known for its component-based architecture and is used by companies like Facebook and Instagram. Then there's Express.js, a minimalist web application framework for Node.js. Express.js simplifies the creation of robust API and web application, making it a crucial tool for back-end development. We also have Angular, which is developed and maintained by Google. Angular is a comprehensive framework for building dynamic web applications with features like two-way data binding and dependency injection. Next, we also have the Vue, a progressive framework that focuses on the Vue layer. Vue.js is beginner-friendly and offers seamless integration with other projects. Learning JavaScript opens up a world of career opportunities. Web developers with strong JavaScript skills are high in demand. In this series, we'll start with the basics and gradually dig deeper into JavaScript. Whether you're a beginner or looking to expand your skills, this series is for you. So the first step in any programming journey is setting up your workspace. So we're going to create a dedicated folder to keep our files organized. Let us just create a folder and let's name it JavaScript Tutorial. For this tutorial, I recommend using VS Code. Visual Studio Code, often referred to as VS Code, is an ideal choice for JavaScript development due to its speed, extensibility, integrated debugging, and a supportive community. To select a folder as a working directory, all we have to do is click the File option and select the Open Folder option. But we can also just drag and drop the folder into the VS Code. Let us just select this folder, drag it, and drop it into the VS Code. Alright, now that we have created our workspace for this session, let's move on to the coding part. But before we jump into the JavaScript, let's set up the basic HTML file with a script tag. This is where our JavaScript code will reside. Inside this folder, let us just create a new file and name it index.html. To create a document boilerplate or an HTML boilerplate, let us type doc and hit enter. And let us just add title into this. Let's name it Hello World because that's what we usually do when we are learning a new language. Now to add a script or a JavaScript code into this HTML file, let's add a script tag. And now inside this, we will use the syntax console.log to log something into the console. Let us log hello world. Other than a static string or number, you can also output variables or objects into this console.log syntax, making it a powerful or useful tool in debugging. And now let us run this file and see it in the browser. And we can see that we are not seeing anything in our browser because we did not place anything in our HTML. But if we're going to look at our console, let us do that by pressing Ctrl-Shift-C and proceeding to the tab console, we can see that we have here the hello world that we have placed in our console. Now, the other way for us to create a script is to add a file that is dedicated for the script or for our code. And for us to do that, all we have to do is create a new file. So inside this folder, let's create a new file and let's name it app.js. So what we're going to do is we're going to link this app.js into this index.html. So for that, let us remove this one because we're not going to need it. Or what we can do is let us cut this one and paste it in our app.js. And what we're going to do is link this script to this file. So to do that, let's add a new property into this tag, and that is a source property, src, followed by an equal sign, and then let's place the location of our app.js into this source. So for that, let us type the dot notation followed by a forward slash. So what happened here is we are telling the HTML that we're going to use in the file that is in the same location as this index.html. And for this, our location is in this JavaScript tutorial folder. What we're going to do right now is type the file name of our script. So for this one, the file name is app.js. And you can see that it actually figures it out. All you have to do is select the recommendation. And right now, this should run as expected. So let's proceed back to our browser. And in here, we can see that we have the same hello world. So to confirm that it is properly connected, let us change the context. So to confirm that we have properly connected our app.js, maybe let's try changing this into hello world, hello one code cam. Now let's go back to the browser. And there we have it. We can see that we have the hello world and hello one code cam. So this console.log or this logging into the console is one of the best way for us to know if there are any errors in our program. Let's say, for example, there is an error and you might want to confirm what contains a certain variable or a certain objects. So another thing, since we have mentioned that this is one of the best thing for us to identify that there is an error in our program, what we can do is to introduce another logging console syntax to us. So let's proceed back to our VS Code. So if you want to particularly display an error, what we can use is console. So in this time, we're not going to use log, but we're going to use error. So let's type error after the dot annotation and then followed by an opening and closing parenthesis. Since this process or since this code is a method or this syntax is a method, and then this will be a string will be enclosed inside this error. And then maybe let us just type there is an error. So right now we can see the hello world that we log into the console, and also we have log an error that is in this one. There is an error, and as you can see, it looks a bit different from the first one because in this one we are intentionally sending an error message to the browser. So that is the best way for us to send an error to the user or to the browser if we are particularly sure that there will be an error if we do a certain event during our, let's say for example, development of our applications. Alright, moving on to the next part of our tutorial, let's move on to the variables. But first, let us rename this file. From app.js, maybe let's rename it console-log.js. And then let's create another file, or maybe let's place a number in this one. 1 dash. And then let's create another file. For this one, let's name it app.js again. Because as we remember, our HTML is linked using the app.js name. And then we're going to discuss the variable. There are 3 variables being used in JavaScript. But before we talk in each of these variables, let us first discuss what does variable mean. A variable is a container for storing data values. You can think of a variable as a name storage location that holds a value. and this value can be changed during the execution of the program. Variables are fundamental to programming because they allow you to work with and manipulate data in your code. First, let's talk about the variable bar. So the variable bar is the oldest way to declare variables in JavaScript. Variables declared with bar have function scope or global scope. That means to say that they are not limited to the block in which they are defined. Now to use bar, all we have to use is type the keyword bar. This is then followed by space and the name of our variable. Let's say for example, we're going to create a variable for a name. So let's type nickname. And for the name, we're going to assign a value into this one. So this should be followed by an equal sign and a string, which is the name of, or which is the name that we will place into this variable. Let's say for example, let's type the name Johnny. So in this case, we are now placing a string named Johnny into this variable. So let's try logging this into the console. Then let us pass the nickname into this console. And we can see that once we reload this browser, we can see that Johnny being logged into the console of our browser. Now to show that this variable bar is not limited to the block in which they are defined, let us show another sample. We're going to use a conditional statement if that has a block of code. So don't worry about this if. We're going to discuss this later on. But for now, I want you to focus on this one, the curly braces, which signifies or defines the block of our code. Now let's create another variable. And then let's name it x with a value of 10. Now let's log it to the console. So we can see that we are defining the variable x inside this block of code, but we are using it outside this block of code. Now let's proceed to the browser and see what we're going to have. And we can see that despite being defined inside a block of code, we can still see or log the number 10 or x into our browser. I recommend avoid using bar unless you have specific reasons to do so. In modern JavaScript, it's recommended to use let and const for declaring variables instead of using bar. The bar keyword has some quirks such as hoisting, lack of block of scope, and the ability to be redeclared, which can lead to unexpected behavior and make the code harder to maintain. Let and cons provide more predictable scope and help prevent common pitfalls, making your code cleaner and less error-prone. Now let's move on to the variable let. Let me just comment the other console.log so that it won't be shown on our preceding examples. Let us just arrange the first example to make it look better. Now let's move on to the variable let. Let allows us to declare variables that are scoped to the block, statement, or expressions in which they are defined. This simply means that the variables declared with let are limited in the scope to the block level scope, meaning providing more predictable behavior compared to the variables declared with bar. Now to use let, all we have to do is use the keyword let, followed by the name of our container. Let's say for example, we would like to contain the age. Then let's assign a value. Now let's try to log this into the console. And there we have it. We can see in our browser that we have successfully logged the variable age with a value of 20 in our browser. A while ago, if you remember, we have said that when we are using the variable let, we are limited to the scope or block in which this variable is declared in. Now let's demonstrate that and go back to the VS Code. Now if you remember a while ago, I have mentioned that if we are using let, we are limited to the scope or the function or the block in which this variable is declared in. Now let's go back to VS Code and demonstrate this. So to begin with, let's create a simple block with a conditional if statement. And for that, let us use the keyword if. This is then followed by a conditional block. And for this one, we're going to pass in true. so that our condition will always be met and we're always going to proceed to this block. And for this block, let's create another let variable. Let's say, for example, that the container that we would like to store this time, or the information that we would like to store inside the container, is a full name. Then let's assign a value. Let's say, for example, I would like to assign the name John Smith. Now, if we're going to try and log this full name into the console, let's see if what will going to happen. Now, let's try checking this one, or let's try checking this into the console. Now, in our console, we can see that we can still see our age, but we can no longer see our full name because this full name that we have in here was declared inside a code block. So, therefore, we can no longer access this one outside the code block that we have created. Now, if we're going to move this statement that logs our full name into the console, inside the if block, we can now log the full name into the console because, as we remember, we can only use the full name, which is defined using the let keyword inside the block where it is being defined. Let's now check it into the browser. And here we go, we can now log our full name into the console. Variables declared with let are confined to the block they're defined in, ensuring better control over variable access and avoiding unintentional conflicts in our code. Now let's move on to the constant or cons. Before we start with the cons, let us first comment this out. Now, constant variables are variables that are constant. They are fixed. We don't expect these containers or values to change over the period of our web application. So let's say, for example, think of something or a data that doesn't change. Maybe, let's say, for example, your birthday. It doesn't change. And let's say, for example, your nationality or your race. So let us first create a comment, variable constant. And in order for us to use cons, all we have to do is type cons, followed by the name of the container. Let's say, for example, birthday. Then let's maybe assign a string into this one. Let's say, for example, June 20, 2001. Now let's try and log this into the console. We can now see our constant variable birthday with the value of June 20, 2001 being logged into the console. Now let's see what will gonna happen if we're going to change the value of the constant variable birthday. Now going back to our browser, we have an error. It says that assignment to constant variable. But what does this mean? It means that we are reassigning a value into a constant variable because we can only declare or assign a value in a constant variable once. And this is the error that we're getting if we're going to assign another new value or another value into that variable again. Because as we have mentioned, using constant variable is ideal to data that we are not expecting to change later on in the lifespan of our web application. Now that we are done talking about variables, we can now move this out of the way. First, let us change the name of this app.js. Maybe let's call it variables. Then let's create another new file, app.js. Now let's talk about data types. Data type refers to the type of value a variable has or what type of mathematical, relational, or logical operations can be applied. So remember that from the last topic, variables, we assume that these are containers or certain data. So what kind of data can we store into these containers or variables? So first, we have the number. For the number, it represents numeric values. For example, we have the whole number 5, or it can be a decimal number like 3.5. It can also be a negative number like negative 10. So let's try demonstrating this one. Let's type let, then the name of the variable that we would like to use. So let's say for example, age, since age is a number, and then let's assign a value 25 into this container or variable. So automatically, if we're going to place a number to a variable, it will then turn into a number. Let's say for example, let's try logging this into the console. Then let's say the value of age is 25. So we are throwing a number data into the client. And let's check the type of this variable. So in order for us to determine a particular type of a variable or container, all we need to do is use the built-in method typeof. Typeof is being used in order for us to determine a certain variable. So whether it is a number, string, or whatever value, it will go into to output that when we use the keyword or method typeof. And right now we can see in the console that we have the value of the age, which is 25, and its type number. Now moving on to the second most common data type in JavaScript or in any programming language is the string. Now for that string, it represents textual data enclosed in single quotation just like this, or a double quotes just like this one. So it can be an alphanumeric character or characters. Now let's try this. Let's try placing this inside as a variable container. So let's use let. Let's say for example name. And then let's assign the value into this one using a single quote. Now let's try and log this into the console. Then let's pass name as the second argument. And we can see that the value of the name is John. And let's also try checking the type of this variable using the built-in method typeof. And we can see that we have the value of name, which is John, and the type of name is a string. Now moving on to the next data type that we're going to talk about is a boolean. So a boolean can only represent two possible data, which is first we have the true, and then the second one is the false. So let's say for example we would like to know the state of a particular object or an access of a particular user. So let's say for example, is a person an admin? That can be true or false. Or the state of a particular person, let's say for example, is a person a student? That can be true or false. So now let's try that. Let's try placing that inside the variable. First, let's type the keyword let, and then let's say for example we would like to check if a person is an admin or not. Then it can be true or false. Just like what we have mentioned a while ago, it will going to become false or true. So let's try logging this into the console. And then we can see that the value of is admin is equals to true. How about checking the type of a particular of this particular variable.
That's it.
And here we can see that we have the value of isAdmin, that is true, and the type of isAdmin is a boolean. So these three are the most common data types that are being used in every programming language, not just in JavaScript. Now in JavaScript, there is also two distinct primitive values that represent absence of value or absence of meaningful value, but they have different meanings and behavior, and that is the null and undefined. First, let us discuss what is undefined. So this one represents a variable that has been declared without value. So let me just minimize this one. So that means to say that, let's say for example, let's create a variable and name this undefined variable or undefined value. Now remember that we declared this variable or we created this variable or container, but we did not explicitly tell what kind of value it will contain. So once we try to log this into the console, and then let us say that the value of undefined value is, and then let's pass in the undefined value as an argument. So we can see here that the value is undefined. So what does this all about? So basically, it represents a situation where a variable has been declared but has not yet been assigned a value. It is a default value for variables that have been declared but not initialized. So if this is an intentional absence of value, there is also an intentional absence of value, and that is null. So this represents an intentional absence of value. Let's try to demonstrate this one. First, we declared or we used the let keyword, and then we created the null value variable, and then we assign the null keyword. That means to say that we are explicitly saying that this value will be having a null value or no value. Now let's try to log this into the console. Now looking into the console, we can see that the value of our null value variable container is null. The null is useful in representing the absence of value in JavaScript, but it is essential to handle the null appropriately in your code to prevent potential errors while trying to access properties or methods on a null. And that wraps up our discussion in JavaScript, data types, and variables. Thank you for reaching this point of the video, and in our next video, we're going to talk about data type concatenation and data type coercion, which are both related to data types and variable. We hope to see you guys again in our next video, and once again, this is Ron Gilbert, and we hope to see you again. Happy coding!